Hi guys, happy Halloween. Obviously, my last video was a more formal, appropriately themed Halloween special, but seeing as how I love Halloween, I think it deserves two specials. And today we're going to be looking at one of the scariest things known to man, uninformed opinions on the internet. So, we all know Monster High, hopefully, and we know that when it first came out, it was a little controversial. And it continued to be pretty controversial throughout its life for a variety of reasons. It's honestly kind of just in the nature of successful fashion dolls to be pretty contentious. When I tell you that mommy bloggers were absolutely tearing these girls to shreds. And I don't know, I thought it would be fun to kind of go back in time and look at all that delicious hate that Monster High was getting. And to be clear, a lot of this is coming from concerned parents, I guess you could call them. And I realize that this is pretty petty, like I'm not denying that. But I also don't want to discourage anyone from having real conversations about children's media and the kind of messages it may be putting out. That's a perfectly fine thing to be concerned with. And do I think Monster High did everything right? No, it had its issues. There's definitely legitimate criticisms, speaking to the first generation specifically. But as you'll see, there is a productive way to have this conversation, and there's what these people were doing. And I am going to keep most of these anonymous, more or less. I'm a firm believer that if you write something and put it on the internet, anyone has the right to criticize and comment on it. But there is a line between that and just putting your name out to an entire audience. And I know some of y'all are Nancy Drew master sleuths, so this is me telling you to put your magnifying glasses down. Do not seek out these people, do not contact them or send them hate or anything like that. There's no reason to do that. You're not going to change their minds. And also, these are statements from pretty much a decade ago. And who knows, they may have grown and adapted, and maybe these quotes no longer reflect who they are. In fact, a lot of these don't even exist anymore, and I had to use the Internet Archive to retrieve them. So with all that out of the way, let's get into it. Okay, this first one, the quote is actually attributed. I don't mind keeping the name in this instance because I guess this person is technically like a public figure. The quote actually comes from a Fox News article, and I think his credentials are important to keep in mind listening to this. But this comes from Patrick Wanis, a human behavior and body image expert, according to the article. These dolls are training girls to feel ashamed of their bodies, to focus on being sexually appealing and sexually attractive from a prepubescent age. By sexualizing these young girls, corporations also create another avenue to market and sell more products to a younger demographic. These dolls also promote skimpiness of clothing, encouraging a young girl to dress like a stripper and believe that they must be as sexually enticing to everyone around them. Intense, right? But yeah, this is what people were saying about Monster High. And I don't know. I honestly think if you look at these dolls and you think that they look as sexy, that these plastic undead teenagers look as sexually enticing, that says so much more about you than it does the dolls. Like, it's creepy, isn't it? The only one who brought sex and strippers into the conversation was you. You're the one saying that these girls' interests are sexy. And in doing so, you're telling girls that dressing and acting a certain way is shameful and immoral. You're the one that's creating the dynamic of telling girls how to act and behave. But I guess that's kind of the point, isn't it? Another example of this from a different website. The ladies are homogeneous in height, shorter than their female counterparts so as not to be intimidating. The designated nerd zombie Gulia is the only female to come with a pair of pants. Mummy Cleo Denial appears to at first glance, but is actually clad in strips of fabric prone to gaps and wink-wink wardrobe malfunctions. Like, what? What? Why is that where your mind goes? You really think this children's fashion doll franchise is going to have wardrobe malfunctions? What is this? Total Drama Island? But the same article also has this gem. Monster High's tagline is "Freaky just got fabulous," which manages to be at once uncomfortably suggestive, insulting, and materialistic. Fabulous denotes fashion, and even if freaky is only supposed to signify that some of the characters are pseudo-weirdos, this sends the message that unusual girls are only interesting if they are fashionable. Sis, you're overthinking it. If Monster High was that focused on being fashionable, do you think they would have ever made Mercedes King? But yes, in all seriousness, the point of fashion dolls is to be fashionable, to reflect fashion trends and give children an outlet for creative expression and character building through fashion. Because as much as these people would have you believe that it isn't, fashion is a legitimate hobby and an interest, and there's nothing wrong with exploring that. But it's interesting, isn't it, how when you've already decided that you hate something, even the most innocuous things like Freaky just got fabulous is like a personal insult against you. Okay, from a different website now. Each kinky playmate features streaked hair, smoky harlot-worthy makeup, and sexy scars. And is it just me, or do names like Coffin Bean, Rebecca Steam, Claudine Wolfe, and C.A. Cupid sound like porn stars? No. No, they don't. Oh my god. Okay, if you can find me an adult entertainer by the name of a Coffin Bean, then I will retract all of my criticisms. But until then, the same article also says that Rebecca Steam comes wearing bondage gear. So there's that. It makes me wonder if these people see like a Batman action figure and they think, oh my god, he's actually wearing a skin-tight latex suit with a gimp mask and bulging sculpted muscles, and you're selling this to kids? Next one. Skinnier than Barbie, more sexualized than the Bratz. From their impossibly thin bodies to their micro mini skirts, booty shorts, and Botox lips, the Monster High dolls embody every damaging stereotype you can imagine, and some you can't, about what it means to be female. What stereotypes exactly? That all women have green skin and detachable limbs? It's also worth noting that the image they used in this article was of Torlei's doll, who wears neither booty shorts nor a micro mini skirt. And I don't know, I think her lips look pretty natural to me. But also worth mentioning that a lot of these do comment on the dolls' bodies. And for me personally, I've never had an issue with how stylized their proportions are. But that is just me. And I don't think it's necessarily an invalid criticism that every character had the same body shape. Obviously, it's for functional reasons, for sharing clothes and such, but it's also taking into account the brand's messaging too. But again, these people do not approach this issue in a productive or well-meaning way. The term eating disorder comes up a lot and used in a very insulting way, which is why I've kind of avoided those statements specifically, because I know that can be a very uncomfortable topic for a lot of people. But I just think it's such an incredibly terrible and damaging thing to throw around. But I don't really want to dwell on that, so moving on. Lastly, I would just like to point out that while I would love to get on board with the celebrate diversity idea Monster High is trying to pitch, being obsessed with shopping, boys, hair, and clothes is still a main theme underlying all these unique monsters, which makes them no better than Barbie or Bratz. As long as you're feminine, gorgeous, and into boys and clothes, it's okay to be different. Yay! Do you know any woman in your life that doesn't fit all these characteristics? Well, you won't find her here. Monster High is more of just the same. Rich, beautiful, mostly white girls with diva-like clothing and makeup. And that's what all the little girls in our society get to relate to and admire. And that's sad. I'm sad now. See, I never really understood this criticism in particular. I know there's some webisodes where they talk about shopping and dressing up and makeup and everything, because again, they're the fashion dolls. But it was never really overwhelming in the way, say, Bratz was. And that's not Bratz shade. They're pretty unapologetic about being about fashion. That's their thing. But I can't think of any Monster High character where their entire character is just about fashion. Cleo and Claudine are probably considered the most fashionable characters, but they have plenty of other interests outside of it. And Claudine wants to be a fashion designer, so obviously that's going to come up. But, Frankie's interested in science and home economics. Laguna had swim team. Gulia likes superheroes and comic books, etc., etc. And there wasn't a single movie where the plot was all about, let's go shopping and kiss boys. And these aren't even things that you need to be a hardcore fan to know. But if you ask anyone who grew up with Monster High, they'll probably tell you that one of the things they loved about it was the wide variety of characters and interests and hobbies they had. There was always someone almost anyone could relate to. So I really do think it comes down to seeing characters, specifically female characters, in, trendy, fashionable outfits and projecting a lot of things onto them. You just assume that they're superficial and shallow because of how they look. Which, interestingly enough, the author of this article also describes themselves as, quote, a raging feminist. Okay, the way this next one starts out honestly kind of made me laugh, so points to her. For the second time in a week, I have run into the ugliest girls I have ever met. I'm not being mean, it's simply true. They're hideous. Dubbed Monster High Girls, they are 10-inch or so fashion dolls and marketed to little children ages 6 to 12. They have been around since last summer, although I've been blessed not to have seen them until now. Honestly, this entire article is kind of golden because they don't say anything outright. They just kind of mention all the products Monster High has with just the most vindictive tone. The Monster High girls are getting rave reviews from toy bloggers and collectors. They're called cute. I had to read that again. I could have sworn they said cut. They were called hot new toys. Well, I guess I agree with the hot. Do people see these horrid things as innocuous playthings for their children? It's hard to fathom. Later at home, I got online to investigate, and I found out that the Monster High dolls are just the beginning. They have a place to sleep, It is called a Draculaura jewelry coffin. Imagine your sweet daughter putting her doll to bed in this. I can just imagine this person, scrolling through Amazon and just getting increasingly more horrified, just gasping and getting red in the face. This playset, the Coffin Bean. Are they drinking out of cauldrons? Sick. This is sick. Just absolutely revolting. And if you scroll down, there's a comment that starts with, I can't help but think of the homosexual culture in the background of all of this. Which, I can't even argue with that. They're kind of right. A closer look at the stories in Monster High reveals that it is perfectly in sync with the Illuminati's agenda, as it promotes themes such as hypersexualization, superficiality, a culture of death, and even monarch mind control. Oh yeah, we're going there. On a basic level, the characters of Monster High are obviously hypersexualized as they are dressed in outfits that can only be found in sex shops. Considering the doll's target market, girls under 10 years old, we can imagine how this trains girls to believe that, in order to be cool, they have to be very sexy very early. Then there's this whole death worship thing going on, with coffin-shaped lockers and coffin-shaped cell phones and coffin-shaped guitars and skulls everywhere. Mix these two very visible aspects together, and you've got this sex and death mass media cocktail that is constantly pushed to all audiences, but particularly young people. I mean, I don't know. I think they're just monsters in a monster school. On a secondary level, almost everything in Monster High relates in one way or another to the dark, disturbing world of Illuminati mind control. The school can be likened to an MK programming center, led by a head mistress whose own head pops off in a literal symbol of dissociation. I mean, I don't know. I think she's just based on the Headless Horseman. To be honest, though, I don't know enough about the Illuminati to refute these claims. For all I know, they could be right. Maybe Mattel was trying to usher in the New World Order. But if it means I can get my own eye coffin, honestly, they can do whatever they want. This next one is interesting because it really says the quiet part out loud, I think. The Monster High and Ever After High brands are being promoted to girls as young as 6. By playing with dolls that have stiletto pumps or hooker platform heels made of pink chains, they are supposed to be learning tolerance. Introducing young girls to this style of dressing is problematic alone, but coupled with it being seen as cool, girls can be confused as to what it means to be a girl, a lady, a woman. And why is tolerance so venerated today, seemingly more important than great moral virtues? So, they admit that they believe there is a right and a wrong way to be a woman, and it depends entirely on how you dress. And they're projecting that onto a doll, a toy, which, not to downplay the importance of dolls in shaping the minds of children, but that's the thing, isn't it? What they're saying about these dolls are indicative of how they think of women. And in trying to protect kids from these quote-unquote unhealthy messages, they're instilling unhealthy messages themselves into the kids. That people who dress a certain way don't have moral virtues, that it's problematic, that these people need to be judged and stereotyped and shamed. And it must be so boring to live like that. Like, it really can't be any fun at all, right? So, this next one, it stems from the author telling their daughter that Monster High dolls dressed inappropriately. And when the daughter pressed for more information, they answered, "I told her that girls who dress like that often don't have full and happy hearts, and they use clothing like that to get attention and make themselves feel full." Which, that is just an incredibly sad and terrible thing to say to anyone, let alone your child. Like, I don't know. I think if you have to explain that something is a problem to your child by teaching them to judge and think less of specifically other girls, then maybe it's you who is the problem. Just a thought. All these next ones are going to be from the same person, by the way. A day meant to celebrate creativity and bright minds began with an explanation as to why your sexualized and unrealistic dolls are not the look our family strives for. All the while, I try not to use the words streetwalker and stripper. My God, people, these are toys for children. Children. Yes, these are toys for children, which is why you shouldn't be struggling to not use those words to describe them. It's actually incredibly weird that these words would cross your mind at all upon looking at a children's toy. You make me tap dance around the topic that your dolls are dressed like women who sell their bodies for sex, often to men who offer zero respect to the human being that lives inside. You don't really need to tap dance around it. You can just not say it or think it. Because again, it's an incredibly weird thing to bring up at all. I don't know. At this point, I do think if you see a group of plastic teenagers wearing dresses and heels, and your first thought is to compare them to sex workers, you maybe need to be on some kind of watch list. Just my opinion. And I think for my last one, I'll show this quote. "I had to explain that real women who wear such small and tight clothing are usually more concerned about how their body looks to other people than how their thoughts and ideas sound." So, there you go. Women who dress in tight clothes can't be smart, or accomplished, or well-spoken. That's why these people don't like Monster High dolls, because they don't look like what their idea of a smart or talented girl is. And rather than challenge that idea, to look into the franchise and see its positive traits, its wide cast of characters, the tough topics it tackled, the diversity, the messages, they decide preemptively that these dolls must be every negative thing that they believe about these women who look and act a certain way. And it's one thing to say to a child, these dolls dress this way because they're older, or to say that their outfits aren't necessarily practical because they're meant to be fashionable and not functional, and they're also a fantasy. You don't have to dress exactly like them because they're not real. But it's another thing entirely to say that anyone who dresses like this is fundamentally flawed in some way. That's not a concern for children, because you're just teaching them not only to be judgmental, but also to be self-conscious of their own behaviors too. So, let's call it what it is. Misogyny. Except the Illuminati stuff, I don't know if that's misogyny. I don't know what to call that, really. But yeah, I think that's all the Monster High hate I can stand for today. Let me know your thoughts down below. I've never really done a video like this before, so apologies if it was more disorganized than usual. But let me know if you'd like to see anything like this again. I know I can probably scrounge up some pretty good unhinged criticisms of Bratz, for example. These mommy bloggers were kind of out of control in general. I even found one that really had it out for Polly Pocket 2, of all things. But when you're done with that, just be sure to like and subscribe for any future fashion doll content. Thank you.